Wise men say the evil does pay thy will. In the spotlight's glow, I find my soul tonight.
Under the blinding lights, one Filipino voice did the impossible. He didn't copy Elvis, he revived him. One note, one moment. An entire theater frozen in disbelief. If stories like this give you chills, subscribe to Kindness Verse now, where legends are reborn and dreams come alive. Backstage, the noise of the theater felt far away, like it belonged to another world entirely. The air here was cooler, heavier, filled with the soft hum of equipment and distant echoes of applause from an act finishing on stage. He stood near the curtain, fingers lightly gripping the edge of the fabric, as if holding on could steady his breathing. The white jumpsuit he wore was neatly pressed but simple, without the glitter people expected when they heard the name Elvis. It was intentional. This wasn't about copying a costume, this was about honoring a spirit. He closed his eyes and let out a slow breath, counting under his breath the way his mother taught him when nerves took over. 1, 2, 3. His chest rose and fell unevenly. He had sung in small community halls, on street corners, even in tiny karaoke rooms where the microphone cut out every few seconds. But this was different. This stage felt alive, like it was watching him before he ever stepped into the light. A production assistant approached quietly, clipboard tucked under her arm, and asked if he was ready. He nodded without speaking. His voice felt precious right now, like something that could shatter if he used it too early. When she walked away, he slipped his hand into his pocket and unfolded the worn photograph he always carried. On one side was a young boy, barefoot, grinning widely while holding a plastic microphone that had long since lost its shine. On the other side was Elvis Presley, frozen in black and white, mid-song, eyes intense, commanding a crowd that looked endless. His father had given him that photo years ago, back when the roof of their house leaked during the rainy season, and the radio crackled more than it played. Elvis songs filled that small home, carried by a radio repaired with tape and hope. On nights when the power went out, his father would sing the melody softly, tapping the rhythm on the table, telling him that music could take you anywhere, even if your feet never left the floor. The announcer's voice boomed through the speakers, calling his name. The sound rolled through his body like a wave. He folded the photo carefully, pressing it back into his pocket over his heart. For a brief second, doubt crept in. What if they laugh? What if they expect a joke? Elvis' impressions had become tricks, caricatures. He wasn't here for that. He was here to tell a story. As he stepped onto the stage, the lights exploded into brightness, forcing him to blink. The audience stretched out before him like an ocean of faces, some curious, some distracted, some already leaning back with crossed arms. The applause was polite, cautious. He felt it immediately, the uncertainty. He stood still for a moment, letting the noise settle, then gave a small bow, a gesture of respect learned from his elders. Simon Cowell sat at the center of the judges' table, arms crossed, expression unreadable. Howie Mandel tilted his head slightly, trying to place him. Sofia Vergara smiled warmly, though her eyes searched for something more. He met each of their gazes briefly, not in challenge, but in honesty. He introduced himself, voice soft but steady, the microphone catching a slight tremble he couldn't fully hide. He spoke about growing up in the Philippines, about singing not for stages but for survival, singing while washing dishes, singing to drown out hunger, singing to feel less invisible. The room quieted as his words sank in. Simon leaned forward just a little. "Why Elvis?" he asked, not unkindly but directly. The question landed heavier than expected. He smiled, a small, genuine smile, and took a breath. He explained how Elvis made him feel strong when everything else felt small, how the music didn't care where you came from or what you had, how when he sang those songs he felt seen, even if no one was watching. For 3 minutes he said, "I'm not poor, I'm not afraid, I'm powerful." Something shifted in the room. The polite smiles faded, replaced by focus. Even the audience seemed to lean in, as if pulled by the weight of his words. The band behind him waited silently, instruments poised but untouched. The stage lights softened, casting a warm glow that wrapped around him instead of overwhelming him. He adjusted the microphone stand slightly, hands steady now. The fear hadn't vanished, But it had changed. It no longer felt like something trying to stop him. It felt like energy, like a reminder that this moment mattered. He glanced once more toward the judges, then toward the audience, and finally up at the lights above, imagining his father listening somewhere beyond them. The opening note hovered in his chest, waiting. The room held its breath, and before a single word was sung, before a single chord was played, everyone could feel it. This wasn't about bringing Elvis back for nostalgia. This was about bringing hope forward. The first notes drifted out slowly, almost cautiously, like they were testing the room before committing. A single piano chord rang through the theater, soft and deliberate, followed by a faint swell of strings that felt more like a breath than music. It wasn't the explosive opening people expected from an Elvis song. It was restrained, reverent, like a memory waking up. He stood completely still, eyes closed, chin slightly lowered. The microphone rested lightly in his hand, not gripped, not forced. For a moment it seemed as if he might not sing at all. The audience shifted in their seats, unsure. Somewhere in the crowd a cough echoed and quickly died out, swallowed by anticipation. Then he sang. One note, low, warm, perfectly centered. It wasn't loud enough to shock, but it was rich enough to stop time. The sound carried weight, like it had lived a life before reaching the air. It didn't imitate Elvis. It remembered him. The note hovered, steady and controlled, and when it gently resolved, the entire theater felt different, as if the oxygen itself had changed. Simon's crossed arms loosened. He leaned forward without realizing it, his eyes narrowing not in doubt, but in focus. Howie's eyebrows lifted, his mouth parting slightly as he turned his head toward the stage, fully locked in now. Sophia's smile faded into something quieter, more emotional, her hand drifting up toward her chest. The second line came, slightly higher, and this time the singer opened his eyes. There was no fear in them now, only intention. He allowed a subtle sway of his shoulders, not exaggerated, not theatrical, just enough to suggest the spirit of the king without becoming a shadow of him. The movement felt natural, like the music was guiding his body instead of the other way around. As the melody unfolded, the piano grew fuller, the strings deepened, and his voice followed, expanding without strain. Every vowel was shaped with care, every consonant soft but clear. This wasn't a performance built on tricks or power alone, it was built on restraint, and that restraint made every note hit harder. The camera cut to the audience. A man in the front row sat frozen, hands clasped tightly together. A woman beside him wiped her eyes, surprised tears forming far earlier than she expected. Further back, a teenager held up her phone, then slowly lowered it, choosing to watch with her own eyes instead. On stage, the singer stepped slightly closer to the mic as the verse ended, drawing the audience in with him. The band paused for half a beat, just enough silence to stretch the moment until it almost hurt. Then the next section began. His voice rose, not suddenly but like a tide, smooth, controlled, effortless. When he reached the chorus, he didn't attack it, he opened it. The sound bloomed through the theater, Philly. Every corner, without ever becoming harsh. There was power there, undeniable power, but also vulnerability. It sounded like someone singing not to impress, but to survive, to be heard, to honor something bigger than himself. Simon's jaw tightened. He blinked once, then again, as if grounding himself. He wasn't smiling. He wasn't frowning. He was listening in a way that left him exposed. Halfway through the chorus, the singer pulled back slightly, softening his tone, letting the melody breathe. It was a risky choice, one that could have lost the room, but instead it pulled everyone closer. The audience leaned forward collectively, as though afraid to miss even a breath. Then came the note, the one that changes everything. He lifted his chin just a fraction, drew in a controlled breath, and released a soaring note that rang out clear and unwavering. It wasn't screamed. It wasn't forced. It was placed perfectly, riding the music like it belonged there all along. The note carried strength, pain, hope, and pride all at once. A visible reaction rippled through the judges' table. Howie shook his head slowly, disbelief written across his face. Sophia pressed her lips together, eyes shining. Simon inhaled sharply through his nose, then exhaled, his gaze never leaving the stage. The note resolved, and instead of rushing forward, the singer let the silence speak. The band pulled back again, leaving just his voice in a single sustained chord. He closed his eyes once more, and for a split second, he looked like a boy singing into a broken radio in a small house thousands of miles away. The final verse arrived quietly, almost tenderly. His voice lowered, roughened just enough to feel human, to feel earned. Each lyric sounded like a confession, like gratitude, like a goodbye and a promise wrapped into one. As the last line approached, the theater was completely silent. No whispers. No movement. Even the cameras seemed to tread lightly. He sang the final word softly, letting it fade naturally, refusing to oversell the ending. The music stopped. For one full second, nothing happened. Then the room exploded. The audience surged to their feet, applause crashing like thunder. Cheers filled the air, raw and unrestrained. Some people screamed, others cried openly. The sound was overwhelming, but the singer stood still, stunned, eyes wide, as if he hadn't expected to survive the moment. Simon rose slowly from his chair, the last of the judges to stand. When he did, the ovation grew louder. His expression was serious, emotional, and unmistakably moved. The singer bowed his head, overcome, his shoulders shaking slightly as the reality finally hit him. He had done it. Not by copying a legend, but by honoring one. And in that moment, under those lights, with that voice still echoing in the air, it felt undeniable. The king hadn't been imitated. He had been revived. The applause refused to fade. It rolled through the theater in waves, growing louder instead of quieter, as if the audience had collectively decided this moment was too important to let go of. People clapped above their heads, some whistling, others shouting his name even though many had only just learned it minutes ago. The singer stood center stage, breathing hard now, chest rising and falling, eyes glassy with emotion. He tried to smile, but his lips trembled, betraying everything he was feeling. Simon was the first to speak. He waited until the noise softened just enough for his voice to carry, then leaned toward his microphone. His tone was different from usual, slower, careful, almost reverent. "I've heard Elvis songs my entire life," he began, "and I've heard thousands of people try to sing like him." He paused, glancing down briefly, then back up at the stage. "But what you just did wasn't copying. It wasn't pretending. It was understanding." The audience erupted again, but Simon lifted a finger gently, asking for a moment more. The singer nodded, eyes fixed on him, barely daring to breathe. "You didn't walk out here trying to be Elvis," Simon continued. "You walked out here being yourself, and somehow, through that honesty, you reminded us why Elvis mattered in the first place." His voice caught just slightly at the end of the sentence, subtle but unmistakable. Howie jumped in, unable to sit still any longer. He leaned forward, hands animated, eyes wide with disbelief. "I've got goosebumps everywhere," he said, rubbing his arms to prove it. That was one of those performances where you forget you're judging a show, you forget the cameras, you forget everything. You just feel... Sophia nodded vigorously, blinking back tears she made no attempt to hide. "I don't even know how to explain this," she said, her accent thick with emotion. "You made something so big feel very personal. I felt like you were singing to one person at a time." She pressed a hand to her chest. "To me..." The singer listened, overwhelmed, his hands clenched lightly at his sides. Each word felt unreal, like it belonged to someone else's story. He had imagined criticism, skepticism, maybe even laughter, but not this. Simon leaned back in his chair for a moment, studying him. The audience sensed something building. A murmur rippled through the theater, anticipation buzzing like electricity. The singer noticed it too, his brows knitting slightly as he looked from judge to judge, unsure what was coming next. "You know," Simon said slowly, "this show is about moments." He gestured toward the stage, the lights, the crowd. "And sometimes, very rarely, someone walks out here and creates a moment that people will talk about for years." The camera cut to the side of the judges' table. A hand hovered over the golden buzzer. The audience gasped collectively, the sound sharp and sudden. The singer's eyes widened in confusion, his breath catching in his throat. He shook his head slightly as if to say, "No, this can't be for me." Simon looked at him one last time. "This," he said firmly, "is one of those moments." The buzzer was hit. A deafening boom echoed through the theater as golden confetti exploded from above, cascading down like a shimmering storm. The lights shifted instantly, bathing the stage in warm gold. The audience screamed, some jumping out of their seats, others clutching each other in disbelief. The singer froze for half a second. Then everything hit him at once. His knees buckled and he dropped to the stage, hands pressed to the floor as tears spilled freely from his eyes. He shook uncontrollably, overwhelmed by a joy so intense it almost hurt. The golden confetti clung to his hair, his shoulders, his white jumpsuit, turning him into something unreal, something out of a dream. Howie stood, shouting, pointing toward him. Sophia covered her mouth, laughing and crying at the same time. Simon watched quietly, eyes glistening, letting the moment belong entirely to the man on stage. The crowd chanted his name now, louder and louder, until it filled every corner of the theater. The sound wrapped around him, lifted him, carried him somewhere he had never been before. He slowly pushed himself to his feet, hands trembling, chest tight. He looked up toward the ceiling, golden confetti still falling, and through the tears, he smiled. A real smile, one filled with gratitude, disbelief, and relief all at once. He brought the microphone back to his lips, struggling to speak. His voice cracked immediately, and the audience cheered in encouragement. He swallowed. Hard, nodding as if to steady himself. "Thank you," he whispered. Then, after a pause, he added softly, "Salamat." He pressed a hand to his chest. "My father used to tell me that music could take you places your feet never could." His voice broke again. "Tonight, I understand what he meant." Simon nodded slowly, visibly moved. The singer glanced down at the confetti-covered stage, then back up at the judges, the audience, the lights. "I didn't come here to be famous," he said. "I came here to honor a man who made me feel strong when I was nothing." A hush fell over the room. "And because of you," he continued, tears streaming again, "I feel like that little boy singing into a broken radio was finally heard." The audience rose to their feet once more, applause roaring with renewed force. The judges clapped along, no longer evaluators, just witnesses. As the camera pulled back, capturing the golden storm, the cheering crowd, and the young Filipino singer standing in the center of it all, one truth felt undeniable. Elvis had been a king once, but tonight, on the AGT 2025 stage, his legacy had found a new heartbeat.